What's going on, everybody? My name is Franco, and today I'm here to share some of my breakout candidates for this upcoming fantasy football season. These are always my favorite to predict because it's honestly half the time it's really hard to go for like these super long shots. Like, if there was one fantasy expert who told you to pick up Amon-Ra St. Brown next year, just call them up for lying right now. So it's my favorite thing to do, so I try to keep some of these realistic. I'm going to go for some like just normal breakout candidates who have been good but not great, and I'm thinking they can make the leap, as well as maybe a rookie here or there, and then later on in these videos, I will go through and do a deep dive and maybe go for some like super deep Amon-Ra St. Brown type players and see if I can predict any of those, just to honestly feel good about myself if I do. Like and comment if you enjoy the content, as well as give me a subscription. That would be really appreciated. I'm going to keep pumping out a video every single day until the fantasy football season starts, and then we'll be looking forward to all that, and we can finally start focusing on some more mock drafts. But in the meantime, let's just keep predicting who we think is going to break out. So I'm going to start off first with Kyle Pitts. This is a player that I feel like everyone's either saying you need to draft him right away or stay away from him at all costs. But I personally believe in him just purely based on volume and also just his dynamic playmaking abilities. He is a freak of nature as an athlete. As we all knew last year, like he was going to be like the most hyped up tight end prospect in fantasy football and honestly forever. And I think he didn't fully live up to the billing, but also he didn't disappoint either. He was a nice, solid tight end. It took a while to find his footing, but now that offense is honestly devoid of playmakers, and a lot of people will say that he's definitely not the most, in the best situation with his quarterback play, with Marcus Mariota being there after Deshaun Watson thing fell through. But Mariota is definitely a little bit slept on as a quarterback. I'm not going to say he's a great quarterback, but he's competent enough to at least get Kyle Pitts to ball enough, and especially considering it's only really him and Drake London and some Cordero Patterson sprinkled in there as their primary pass catchers. I think he'll do just fine in terms of volume. Definitely the coverage will be there increased, but also he will be improved as a playmaker and also just time on the field as well. He was on the field for nearly 75% of the snaps last season, which is absurd, especially for a tight end. I think only Kelsey matched that amount, and there's really not a lot of reason for that to change, besides the fact that Atlanta's offense might not be as free-flowing this year, given the loss of Matt Ryan. But also that wasn't a very good offense last year, and he still put up some pretty respectable numbers. So I expect that number to go up, even if he might not have as many more touchdowns. He'll definitely get a lot more receiving yards, a lot more catches, and he's just too dynamic of a player to think that he won't finish worse than the tight end 3. And I will admit the ADP is a little high at 31, but regardless, I think he'll be a great pick, and I think he might even end up as a top 2 or top 1 tight end. Moving forward, I'm pretty sure I've mentioned Pittman in like every video I've had, but that's just because I'm so high on him this year. He's right now ranked as the wide receiver 14. You can get him at around pick 50, roughly, and I think he's really due for a breakout year because, as I just aforementioned, Matt Ryan went to Indianapolis Colts. He didn't leave, he was traded for nothing. Went to the Indianapolis Colts, and he's ready to honestly break out. This is the best quarterback Pittman's ever had, which is really saying something. He had a broken Carson Wentz last year, and then a 49,000-year-old Phillip Rivers the year before. So this is his year, and I really think it's finally his time to break out and truly become a wide receiver 1 like he's been on the verge of being. But he's just been held back by some inconsistent play, both on his own and his quarterback. But I think he'll grow and he'll continue to get better, and his rapport with Matt Ryan should be pretty fluid. They complement each other very well, and he's just a very efficient wide receiver quarterback duo, and also just he has a great situation. He doesn't really have much big competition with Zach Pascal as wide receiver 2 and Mo Alley-Cox as the tight ends, and plus the opponents will have to respect Jonathan Taylor a lot, so they won't be able to fully commit to shutting down the pass. I think he'll have a great chance to really have that wide receiver 1 type season. He's right now 14. I think he finishes in the top 10, but even so, finishing at 14 with that low of an ADP, you can get him in like the late 4th, early 5th round. Feels like a steal in my eyes, and I think he'll be a great pick this year. I'm trying to get him anywhere I can. My next option is Darnell Mooney of the Chicago Bears, right now ranked in the top 25 of wide receivers with an ADP around 65. He'll be a pretty popular breakout candidate this year, mostly based on the situation. It's pretty similar to Indianapolis in that he's the best wide receiver and just pass catcher on that team in general. But Chicago definitely does have a much worse offense than Indianapolis will. They're just not as good of a team in general. It's a new coaching scheme, and they really haven't had great success on the offensive end in the last couple of years. That being said, with the new hiring and also most importantly the firing of Matt Nagy, I think it's a great situation for Mooney to step up and be that alpha receiver, especially with the loss of Allen Robinson, where he signed with the Bears or the Rams in free agency. I'm all over the place. He signed with the Rams in free agency, opens up a lot of snaps, and they didn't really get too much in terms of department of free agency. They drafted Velus Jones, they got Byron Pringle. None of these guys who really have that same build as Darnell Mooney. And I know a big knock on him is that he doesn't have a typical wide receiver 1 build. He's built more like Tyler Lockett, for example. So it's definitely a little bit harder to project him that high, which is why his ADP might be falling this low. But the upside of him is that he can easily be a low-end wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2 based on volume. He has a knack for the big play. He's got more yards after the catch, or more yards per catch, rather, last year than Tyreek Hill, more targets than Jamar Chase. Like, the volume is going to be there. He's fast, he's speedy, he's quick. I can't think of any more ways to describe how fast he is. And I just really think the upside is here, even if he doesn't end up living up to the hype and he ends up being like a wide receiver 25, wide receiver 30. I think the upside is still way there, especially at pick 64. Someone who's been kind of rising up the boards a little bit I've seen is Breece Hall, who's ranked as the 22nd running back, but his ADP is in the low 40s, which means that you're going to have to reach a little bit if you want to get him in the 4th or the 5th. But I think it's really worth it. The Jets drafted him in the 2nd round. They actually traded up, used a decent amount of draft capital to get him, and I think he's going to make a good return on their investment for them. He's a dynamic running back who has an ample opportunity to be a bell cow. I know Michael Carter's a little bit scary there, and honestly, Breece Hall might not get off to the fastest start, just given that they might share a little bit in the beginning, but I think Breece Hall will win over this backfield by the time we're in week 5 or week 6 at the very latest. He's got great hands out of the backfield as well, so he's definitely more of a PPR option there, and I just think he's going to have a full opportunity to take over what should be a more high-powered offense. I'm not going to say the Jets are going to be crazy super, but they're going to be competent, and they're going to have a lot of weapons, and they should have some good drives. The touchdown potential is there. He'll definitely be used to goal line back more often than not, so I see his potential being sky high. And as always, there's one rookie quarterback or one rookie running back who has the opportunity to be a bell cow for their team. And in this opportunity, in this case, I really think it's going to be Breece Hall. Gabe Davis, very, very popular breakout pick after his 4-touchdown performance with the Bills, which really put him on the radar. He really just had a great game there, one of the best we've ever seen in the playoffs. And it wasn't enough for the win, sadly, but it'll definitely be enough to put him on people's draft boards. Right now, he's ranked at around 75 ADP, wide receiver 35, and I honestly think that'll go up as we get closer to the season. Him and Josh Allen are going to look to build on that rapport that they had, and as is the case with some of these other wide receivers I've had on this list, the key is volume. At the end of the day, if you're especially in PPR, the key to have is volume, especially with a quarterback that is Josh Allen. I've had Mooney with the Bears and Matt Ryan, although he's still a great quarterback, he's getting up there in age. I would argue that Gabe Davis has one of, if not the best quarterbacks in football, and he just has the opportunity to really go off and collect his volume in that regard, especially at such a late ADP. The ceiling is sky high for him to really just take off and be a solid wide receiver 2 in that Bills offense, especially given just the amount of vacated snaps and vacated targets left behind by the losses of Cole Beasley and Emmanuel Sanders. Even though those guys weren't exactly, the best wide receivers for fantasy purposes, they got a lot of targets and they actually were pretty well off in that offense. And they're definitely going to have a little decent sized hole that Gabe Davis, I think, will fill very nicely. That I feel like he's going to be someone by the time drafting comes around who'll go a 60, 65 ADP. Maybe not this late, but I could definitely see him finishing in the top 25 realm of wide receivers, especially if Buffalo's offense continues to just keep clicking the way they have in previous years. Going a little bit further now, we have Russell Gage as one of my last options on this list. He's coming in at wide receiver 43 with an ADP of 117. He was the wide receiver 1 in Atlanta, which is wild to say, with last year with Matt Ryan before signing with Tampa Bay, and which some people thought was a little surprising because I was he's going to be wide receiver 3, but once you think about it, after the injuries to Chris Godwin, as well as the departure and retirement of Rob Gronkowski, he's wide receiver 2 on an offense led by Tom Brady in a place where there's a ton of vacated snaps. If you think I'm repeating the same things I said about Gabe Davis, you'd be right. It's just too much of an opportunity to pass up on. And although Russell Gage might not have the longevity that Gabe Davis will, because eventually Chris Godwin will come back from injury, for at least the beginning of the year, for this value of an ADP, you can get him in the 11th, the 12th round. He'll be a great pick for you to maybe even plug in and start in those first couple of weeks, because Tom Brady's going to throw the ball 40 times a game, and he's going to need someone to throw it to. And obviously Mike Evans will be a great fantasy option this year, but Russell Gage in his own right for those first couple of weeks with no Chris Godwin will be a superstar in my eyes. He should be a top 25 receiver those weeks. He's got all the opportunity there. He's still very talented. I know last year wasn't great for him. He only had 770 yards, but he definitely has an opportunity to put up some really good numbers this year, especially in the beginning, and I think it'll be a great option to take a late round flyer on and just see where the upside is with that pick. Like I said, there's a million more breakout candidates. I'm definitely going to be doing different iterations of this series. Definitely going to be more parts coming, as well as some deeper dives to see you can go for a late round flyer and see what happens there. But in the meantime, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Subscribe if you want to see more content. I'm going to have ones coming out daily, and I will see you guys in the future.